is Laura Pepperwoo from the Right Life magazine, and today I'm delighted to be speaking with Roz Morris. Roz Morris is a professional writer, editor, and blogger living in London. As a ghostwriter for high-profile authors, her fiction has sold more than 4 million copies, and she now has 2 novels under her real name, My Memories of a Future Life and Lifeform 3. As well as fiction, Roz has also written a series for writers called Nail Your Novel, which I'm very excited to talk about today. Hi Roz, it's great to talk with you today.
Hello, Laura. Nice to meet at last.
Yes, finally, from across the pond.
Yes, and thank you for that great intro. I mean, I've been following your magazine and you do lovely things. So
Yes, you actually were in an issue of the magazine. We talked about you
yes,
being a ghostwriter, which is actually my first extremely unoriginal question, but I know that it's going to be the one on everyone's lips. It sounds so exciting, ghostwriting for these high-profile authors. And how on earth did you get into that?
well, it was luck. I happened to know some writers. I'd been writing quite a lot myself, and then my husband was doing a ghostwriting project, and the brief changed so drastically that he would have had to write a completely new book. And he already had another job he had to move on to. But he said to me, "Well, I know you could write this because you know what you're doing." So I did, and we presented it to the editor, and the editor said, "Oh, wonderful, exactly what we needed." And then he said, "Well, actually, Roz wrote it." And that meant I got in by the back door, because it's often very hard to get an intro.
Yeah.
But I proved that I could do the job and I could give them what they wanted. And I loved working with the editor. And so from there it started.
Wonderful. And so you've written quite a lot of books by now. Just tallying up the number in my head, it must be, it's double figures at least.
Oh, at least, yes, I've sort of lost count. It's at least a dozen ghosted books,
Right.
and then 4 that have actually got my name on.
So that, I mean, the big achievement is finishing the book, right? And that's what we wanted to talk about today. Is so many of us start these books and we almost finish, but it's that last 10% just fixing and polishing, and well, you think it's going to be the last 10%, and it ends up being a bulk of the work. So let's talk about the big roadblocks that you see writers facing all the time that prevent them from finishing their book and going, that extra mile.
Well, it goes back further than even getting to the end of the draft. I mean, I know a lot of people who have the first few chapters of things on their hard drives, and they start another book and another book. And so the first thing you've got to do is find a way of getting all the way to the end. So you have to have a number of ways to keep your confidence in what you're doing, because quite often people think, "Oh, I got halfway through, but then I saw something else that was better, and then that meant I didn't have any faith in my idea anymore." So you need to do a lot of preparation before you start. I know the writing world is divided into people who like to just pants, as they call it, writing by the seat of your pants, start at the beginning, right to the end. That usually fails. It's usually much better to plan where you're going to go, and that may be a formal synopsis that you write out, or it may be writing individual scenes on index cards and shuffling them around to get the right order. That's what I like to do, because it gives me a lot of flexibility and creativity. And you also have to really sometimes just be prepared to tough it out when you don't feel like it, because when you do get to the end, it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about confidence. You mentioned that, and I think that jumped out to me. And I know one of my writing friends, at least, when he's working on a manuscript, he does not read other books because he says it just throws him.
Oh, yes.
He'll read another book and he'll think, "Oh, it's so much better than mine," and it'll start bringing up all sorts of doubts. What do you think about that? And also, what do you do to stay confident when you're writing a manuscript?
Oh, each book is different. Each book tests me in different ways. So sometimes I find I can actually read other books and they galvanize me. They make me go back and think, "Oh yeah, I can do this because mine is different," and so it's my individual way. other times I might not be able to read anything, or I'll read non-fiction to keep me in the world of it. So to an extent, you have to work out what's going to be right for you and what you're writing. But I totally sympathise with your friend who says they can't read anything. But you do need something to keep your enthusiasm up. So if reading other writers is going to derail you a bit too much, you don't necessarily have to read fiction. I find poetry can be really, it can really just get me feeling like expressing myself on the page. So I find some anthologies of poetry, for instance, so you get a lot of different voices you can dip into, and see if you can keep something by your desk where you can just open it and think, oh yeah, the love of the written word is still there. I still feel like me, and then you can go back and write a bit more. And another thing I find really helpful is music, because you can just immerse yourself, find a piece of music, maybe classical, maybe something very sort of minimal even, that helps you slow down, helps you slow your thoughts down, or maybe something energizing. I know people who write to, quite fast-paced pop, but it's all a matter of finding what works for you and for that particular book as well. But there are lots of things you can do to give you the confidence in yourself as a creative person, and to help you sort of recapture the joy of creativity, because there has to be quite a lot of joy there to keep you at it. It is hard work sometimes, but we are doing it because, first of all, we loved it.
Yeah, I love that answer. And when you talked about music, it reminded me of something that has been really obvious to me recently, which is other forms of art can really feed into your inspiration, right? So going to an art museum or a gallery, or going to listen to music, or all these kind of things. Like if you do want to avoid reading other people's books or kind of immersing yourself in literature, there's another way to stay inspired, which is the artistic side of things. And I would imagine for you living in London, that's just a daily occurrence, just getting out and about and seeing just the vibrant city life would kind of help you stay inspired.
Yes, and particularly the further I get into an idea in a book, it begins to get to a phase where the universe is giving me things,
right,
or I only notice things that have got something to do with what I'm writing. And in the very early stages, you often don't get that, and you're searching and you're groping. So that's when I find I have to do a lot of brainstorming and finding books that might help me work out what I should do with an idea. But then the later I get, the more it seems that everything I take notice of is actually feeding into the book.
Oh, interesting.
So yes, you can recharge in a lot of ways, as you say, with art, or maybe just going and sitting in a coffee shop and looking out for people who seem to give you ideas.
Yeah, I love doing that myself. And I'm curious, you mentioned that your husband was a writer. Do you have other writers in your life that you bounce ideas off, and that your support network in the terms of your writing? How does that work for you?
Oh yes, we do. But all the writers, we know quite a few, but we all work in different ways. So one writer I know hates revision, and I'm always saying, oh, but this is the most creative bit, you can do so much. And so he just loathes it. Other people I know just like to write very, very long manuscripts and then hone them down. So we all have our very different ways. Again, it's like finding what works for you. But we are all beset by the same demons in a way. We want to do justice to an idea. We have periods where we're stuck, but you could also get that support online if you find the right people who you chime with, the podcasts that make you feel like getting back to the keyboard and doing a bit more. So just because you don't know writers who's done, now there are so many places to find these companions who can help you just carry on a bit longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk about, you talked about your friend who hates the revision process, and you obviously love that, and I feel like that's probably such an advantage to you in finishing the book, because just from my personal experience, I tend to write non-fiction, that's my genre. But just for fun, I did NaNoWriMo a few years back, and I finished my 60,000 words of this fiction book, and I have been editing it ever since, and it has. I mean, I don't have a process, and I came to the realization recently that I need more of a process, because where do you stop with edits? Like, I feel like I could just be polishing it forever. And that's what I really want to get to today. Like, what is your process, and what would you recommend for people in my position that would like to finish this book, but I mean, I could just be finishing it forever, quite honestly.
There's always a phase where you feel like you could be finishing it forever, but
Okay.
eventually I find there comes a point where I'm reading through and I think I want to change, and this takes a lot of goes, and I also make sure I give manuscripts a good rest, because you have to work on it really hard and then put it away so that you've almost forgotten about it. So you need it to be able to surprise you again, and you also need to be able to forgive the things that you feel you didn't do very well. You have to feel able to tackle them. So that's very important. You can get worn out with revision, but when it's done right, you get really good books, much better than you could do in just one pass or two passes or three passes. I mean, I think I go through a book about 40 or 50 times, but they're always looking for different things, solving usually one small problem at a time.
Okay.
So that's another important point.
Yeah.
You can't get it all right in one go.
Yeah.
So what I do is I tackle the structure first, and I do this thing that I call a beat sheet, and I describe it in one of my books.
Okay.
It's an absolute lifesaver. It's a way of doing an X-ray of what is happening, whether it's interesting enough, whether it's keeping everything going forwards. Because if your book is paced well, then your reader will be hooked.
Yeah.
Then later on, I concentrate on how I've done the nuances of the characters. Usually in my head, I know who they are as individuals, but I haven't necessarily brought it out very well in the first draft.
Okay.
So I go through another draft where I'm working out how I have differentiated them, whether the differences are clear enough to the readers, whether their motivations are clear enough.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another big revision phase.
Mm-hmm.
Then the last thing I do is language. This is a mistake that a lot of people make. They think that revision is just about doing some language and spelling corrections and finding the nice phrases. Now, we do want perfect language and spelling and everything, but so much else needs to be got right first, that I think you're wasting your time if you concentrate on those things as your first edit. And for me, the language edit is the very last thing. It's like the tuning.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I take most pleasure in, actually, just making the prose really sing and do its job. But I find it can't do the job until the rest of it is working.
Which makes so much sense, because obviously how a character is developed is going to play into the language and the dialogue that they use and all the rest of it. So you said structure, characters, language, and the fine tuning.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And at what point in that process do you send it out to beta readers or have someone else's eyes on your manuscript?
Well, actually, when I think I've got all that perfect, and then they come back and batter me. And we start again. Not completely again, but yeah, I wouldn't dream of showing it to anyone until I'd gone as far as I could myself. And then I rely on them to find the things I couldn't find just by working with it in solitude. And it's the same with when I send it to an agent. And I always advise people who, because I offer editing services, people will write to me and say, well, what stage should I send you my stuff? And I say, when you've gone as far as you possibly can with your own resources, including your beta readers, because I need to tell you what you can't get from all your other sources.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, how many critique partners or writing groups or other people do you rely on for feedback?
Well, I have two main people. There's Dave, my husband, but he is a writer and he is not kind. And I absolutely scourge his manuscripts because it matters to us to do the job properly.
Yes.
And he also understands the things I like, the kinds of influences that I might be aiming for. So he's very good because he knows what I would like the book to be. And it's very important, whichever critique partner you use, that they are able to recognise your potential and what you should be aiming for. He's very good at that. And the other one is my agent, who is also very good about that. He's very good at spotting different kinds of problems, but he is in tune with what I want to do. And then I've got various other people who I don't necessarily bounce the manuscript off them, but what I do is I ask them for advice with the cover and the blurb and other sort of peripheral ways of presenting the book. But they're very important because they will feed back to me and say, oh, you've got that completely wrong, do not use that cover. Or you've written a blurb with too many words in it.
Right.
So you need people with all sorts of different qualities. And some writers I know, though, have quite a few critique partners who'll be able to advise them on one on characters, one on plot, one on pacing, all those different things. Again, you build up what you need.
Yeah, great. Okay. Was there anything else that you feel that our viewers should know about how to nail their novel? I know you've written a whole series, so it's a difficult question to answer. But if you had to impart any gems of wisdom today...
Everybody actually has their different strengths and weaknesses. And something that I'd say is not so much a big mistake, but with criticism, when it's really hurts when you get a big long letter from an editor that says, oh, this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong, and you probably only see the things it says that's wrong. But you must also look for what the editor is telling you you're doing right, because the chances are, particularly if it's your first novel, you've spent years learning how to do it. There'll be some parts of it that you'll have done very well on your own, and look for that in a critique report. I actually did a post on this a few months ago where I wrote a post that said why your editor admires you and why you may not realise this. Because my job is to tell you, is to say what you haven't been able to learn by yourself, but it is also to say you're doing this very well, your characters are great, you've got a strong sense of pacing, you've got a sense of the unusual, lots of things, so look for that.
Yeah, I think it's the same with anything. We always naturally tend to look, the negative seems to jump out. And a friend of mine has a wonderful book, and she has perhaps one awful review on Amazon out of 75 glowing reviews, and that's the one that really stings, and the one that she constantly wants to talk about and discuss. And I have to remind her to start to really see the positive points that people have pointed out. And I can definitely see when you receive all of this feedback from an editor, which you've solicited in a way, you've asked for this feedback. You just have to grow a tough skin and accept that and take it constructively.
And let it settle as well. When you get an editor's report, read it and then put it away and go and rage or whatever and say, oh, they didn't understand me. But start then tackling it in small quantities, and you'll probably find that some of it you start to think, actually, they were right, but I was quite sore about it.
It's never going to feel good, but...
No, it doesn't. It's hard for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Roz, you've mentioned that you're an editor, and you talked about your blog, which is fantastic. I love your blog. Loads and loads of great writing advice on there. Can you tell us where else writers can find you online, and perhaps even show us your books if you have them close by?
I do. This was my... I'm just checking I can line it up in the camera. There we are.
Yes, perfect.
Nail Your Novel. That was my original writing book, which is basically a project plan for how to write any novel. Doesn't matter what genre it is, and it will take you in 10 steps through all the phases, so from your initial idea to the final edits. And it will explain all these techniques that I've been talking about, including this thing I've got called the beat sheet, which is what I described as the way to create an X-ray of the book so that you can see what you need to do to the structure. And I'm now working on follow-up series. This is the first one. It's about characters.
Okay.
Because if your characters are strong, then you can usually draw people into the book effortlessly. So this contains all the tricks and the mistakes that people make.
Perfect.
And it's called Writing Characters to Keep Readers Captivated. And then I've got a couple of novels as well, which are just the kinds of things that I like to write.
Yeah.
This is my first one. My Memories of a Future Life. It's literary fiction, but it is really quite a fast-paced story with a lot of resonance and questions. So reading groups are rather enjoying getting into the questions it provokes. And I've just released this, which is Lifeform 3. Thank you.
Yeah.
And this is really literary science fiction or science fiction fable, so the kinds of questions that Ray Bradbury might talk about. But at its heart, it's a story about things that we are losing by building up too much of the environment, by using computers and software all the time, and how nature is getting completely erased almost, and what we are losing as humans by this. And the best place to find me is either on Twitter, which is Roz_Morris, or on my blog, which is nailyournovel.com.
Fantastic. And I'll leave all the links under the video so people can come and say hi. And I've got no doubts that people will want to find out more about you after this chat.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Roz, we'll have a wonderful, I guess it's evening over there. So
yeah, it's getting towards the evening, yes.
Yeah, go enjoy the sun. And I look forward to talking with you soon.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Thanks, Roz.
Thanks, Laura.
Bye.